my name is Sonnet, and I love to talk about books and crochet and books together really is a huge passion of mine. And in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you all of the books that I read in the month of January, what I thought about those books, and then all of the crochet granny squares that I made from those books that I will be assembling into a book blanket. So if you're new here and you don't know about my book blanket, I have a whole video that I just released last week that quickly goes over how I'm doing this, the whole method for my book blanket. But if you don't feel like watching that video, I get it. Basically, every single book that I read in the year 2025, I will crochet a granny square inspired by the cover of that book. And at the end of 2025, I will join them all together to make a big blanket that represents my reading year. Again, definitely check out that video if you are curious more about the details of the book blanket and what squares I'm using for each book. So in the month of January, I ended up reading 13 books, maybe? It gets complicated right at the beginning, and you'll see in a moment. It's either 12 or 13 books. We'll see what you think. But 2025 started off interesting. So at the end of 2024, I was in a pretty bad reading slump, like really bad. I didn't read much from June to December. So I was super excited for The Haunting of Hecate Cavendish. Wow, I thought this was going to really kickstart me into 2025. This was going to be it. Here we go, 2025 reading. And wow, this one, not my favorite. This book was just very boring. I gave this one 3 stars. It was just not very interesting. And I feel like this book just really suffered because they were trying to do all of this stuff. They were pulling all of these topics and all of these trendy things that are going on in books, and they shoved them all together. Paranormal, historical fiction, Egypt, mythology, fantasy, religion, all of it was thrown together, and it was just very overwhelming. And you would think it would be extremely exciting, but it was just boring. This is my first book by Paula Brackston. I don't know if I'll read another one. We'll see. Here's the square that I made. So you can see the cover of the photo, and then we have the square. I tried to incorporate a little bit of the yellow of her keys in there, but then it's also very blue and very green. Yeah, 3 stars. I'll probably forget I read this one by next month. Now, if it wasn't for this next book, The Haunting of Hecate Cavendish probably would have driven me deeper into that reading slump. But luckily, at the same time I was reading Hecate, I was reading this other book. And wow, what took me so long to read this one? Now, here's where it gets confusing, whether I've read 12 or 13 books in January. And that's because this book is intended to be one big book, but it's actually 3 smaller books that you then put together and it makes one big book. So I can't decide if I want to count each of the 3 small books as one book and make a square for each of those, or if I make just one big square when I complete all 3 of the stories. The second book in January was The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. I have 2 different versions of this story. We have this illustrated one that is one giant book. It is The Lord of the Rings. And it has all of the 3 books in there. But then I also have this version, which is the pocket version. The Hobbit's included in there, which is really nice, but we're focused on The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and Return of the King. Now, The Fellowship of the Ring, 5 stars. I love this. I have never read any of the Lord of the Ring books. I have read The Hobbit, and I reread The Hobbit this summer, and it was incredible. Oh my goodness. So I was so excited to read The Lord of the Rings, and I just love this. I love it so much. The world building, these characters, everything about this book is just so wonderful. Oh, I love it. And everyone's always singing or reciting poetry. The poetry is gorgeous. They're even Legolas singing. Which is great. So yes, 5 stars, but let me know what you think. Do you think I should make a square based off of all 3 of them, and the square would just be the color of the volumes? Because let's be real, I'm reading these ones. I'm not going to be holding the big one. Or do I do one big giant square like in the middle that is a representation of just how gigantuan this one is? So there it is, the second book-ish, maybe, I don't know, The Fellowship of the Ring, Tolkien, 5 stars. The next book in January was our book club book of the month. So I do host a book club every month. Pretty relaxed. You read it at your own pace and you let me know if you liked it or not, or you don't. You keep your opinions to yourself. Very relaxed. Just want to make sure people are reading, and it's kind of nice to have a recommendation for a book. And this month, the book was The Princess Bride. Now, this is a book by William Goldman, and I listened to the audiobook of this one. This one was weird, though, because the audiobook, and it is narrated by Rob Reiner, it's an abridged version of The Princess Bride. So after I listened to the audiobook of the Rob Reiner one, I went to YouTube and I found a playlist, and I'll be sure to link that down below, of a YouTube user who reads the entire unabridged The Princess Diaries. And then I listened to that right after. So I technically read this one twice, but I only counted it as one. Here's that square. This one I gave a 3.5 star to. I liked this book. This book was very adventurous and it was very funny. I laughed out loud a lot. However, I could not stand Buttercup. I couldn't stand Buttercup in this story. I don't know what it was. There was also some other aspects of this book that I just wasn't a big fan of. But again, it was very adventurous. And if it wasn't for Fezzik and Inigo, I would not have enjoyed this book nearly as much. And this is one of those very rare situations where, yes, the movie is better than the book. I stand by that 100%. And I never grew up with the movie. I don't have a lot of nostalgia for the movie. I didn't see it until I was an adult. And I've only seen it maybe now about 3 times. But every time I watch the movie, I end up appreciating it more and more. And I do honestly believe, after watching the movie, after we listened to the audiobook, I do believe that the movie is better than the book, for sure. So 3.5 stars for The Princess Bride. It's fine. If you love the story, maybe pick it up. But if you're just like, no, movie's fine with me, I think that's fine too. I think you're good just with the movie. So the next book that I read is a graphic novel. Now, some people might say that graphic novels don't count, but to them I say this is my list. And in my list, they do count. So this is Lightfall by Tim Probert. This is the first volume in the Girl and the Galdurian series, and this was great. I gave this one a 4-star review. I loved it. Now this follows Bee, a young girl, and one day she comes across Cad here, who is a Galdurian, and he's the last known Galdurian of his, last known Galdurian, right? But he thinks that his family's out there, so he wants to find them. Bee tells Cad that she's going to take him to her adoptive grandfather, who can help him find his family, but what do you know, they get back to her house and her adoptive grandfather is missing. So they go on this big adventure to find where he went. And there's a lot of things that happen. A lot of silly things, a lot of, intense things that happen. This was great. I loved the story. I didn't get a chance to get to the other 2 volumes, but I definitely have them and I definitely will be getting to them soon. But the number one reason why I rate graphic novels the way I rate them is the artwork. And Tim Probert, it's gorgeous. I mean, just look at the cover. I don't want to share too much, but if you look at the cover, just look at that beautiful artwork and the color story of this book. Oh, it's beautiful. The character design is very cool. There's a lot of really interesting and unique and sometimes yucky and weird characters. It's really cool. I love it. Can't wait to get more into the series. 4 stars. Here's the square, and I'm very happy with how the square turned out. I thought it represents that cover perfectly. Oh my gosh, so good. Read a graphic novel if you like them. A lot of people don't like graphic novels, but if you think you do, I highly recommend graphic novels. They're so great. There's especially like middle grade graphic novels, lighthearted but still full of heart and really good stories. I love my graphic novels. So the next book is interesting. I found this at a thrift store for like $1, And I've been wanting to read this one for a little while, and this is Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. You probably have maybe heard of this title, and I know this title because way back when, the 2000s, holy cow, maybe, has to be, like 2000s, Disney came out with like a live action version of this. I think I saw it one time, don't really remember much about it, except for Eternal Life. That's all I remember. And essentially, this is the story of Winnie Foster, and she meets the Tuck family. And the Tuck family has discovered a spring on her family's land that grants immortality. You drink it, you live forever. And so she goes to hang out with this Tuck family for a couple of days. Craziness ensues, but it's essentially the Tuck family trying to talk to her about the spring and why she should leave the spring alone. And I gave this one 3.75 stars. Here's the square. I wish the green was a little bit more olivey toned, but it's fine. It still is fine. But this book was really interesting. It really went down a path that I wasn't expecting when it comes to the idea of immortality. And I liked it. I thought it was very powerful, especially for a younger reader, which this one is geared towards younger readers. I think that would be an interesting read for them because as a kid, you would think about it. Okay, there's the spring. If I drink from it, I live forever. What's there not to love? This book will tell you. This book will tell you what's not to love. And so I really enjoyed that. So happy I read this one. Yeah, every time I think about it, I enjoy it more and more. So that's good. Now this next book, wow. I have read this book before. It is a reread, but I decided to read this one because I love it so much and I wanted to feel happy. I wanted to feel love and fear. I wanted to feel all the feelings. My gosh, I love this book. This book is not going to be for everybody. Let me just say. Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Canas. I love this. There is a video. I have a video where I review this book. And I'm kind of sad because I feel so strongly and passionate about this book. And not everybody feels the same way that I do. And it just makes me kind of sad because this book is gorgeous. So this follows the story of Nestor and Nena, and they were children together. As teens, they kind of, had feelings for each other, but then something awful happens to Nena and Nestor runs away. 9 years later, Nestor needs to come back. This is during the Mexican-American War, and wow. So a lot of times I feel like people are going to read this one because they're going to read it and they're going to expect a lot of vampires. And the vampires are in this book. And the vampires in this book are terrifying. When they are on the page, it is just, it's so scary. They are terrifying. The description of them is just bone chilling. And the scenes with the vampires are equally as bone chilling and heartbreaking. But the vampires aren't in this book a lot, at least not those ones. There are other vampires in this book, and those ones are probably even more scarier than these ones. I love historical fiction, and I love historical fiction that takes place during the Mexican-American War. It is something I am very passionate about, and so this book is just incredible. Isabel Canas is amazing. I love her writing. The love story in this, some people are a little annoyed by it, but I think it is so romantic. Oh my gosh, the love story between Nestor and Nena, I think is gorgeous. Just beautiful and heart-wrenching, and I love it. It makes me feel all the feels, and I can't express how much I love it. This is a 5-star book, so because it's a 5-star book, it gets a fancy square, which is this one. So there is that square there. It looks really good too from the back. You can see just the colors there. But Vampire of El Norte. I wish I kind of incorporated the yellow instead of the white, but I still love it. I still love this book. I will reread this book for the rest of my days. And I believe Isabel Canas will be coming out with a new book towards the end of the year, and I will be first in line to get that one. So 5 stars. Vampires of El Norte. And this square actually I got from this book here, which is A Modern Guide to Granny Squares. So obviously I just changed up the colors to match the book. The next book in January was a 4-star book. I really loved this book. And this is Again and Again by Jonathan Evison. Now, this follows the story of Eugene. Eugene is an elderly man that is in assisted living, and he befriends one of the attendants that's there at the assisted living. They bond, they have a really good friendship, and Eugene starts telling him stories of his lives. Yes, his lives. So the whole thing about this book is apparently Eugene can recall his past lives. And wow, it's a lot. It's really interesting. But the thing about it is Eugene is definitely an unreliable narrator. I loved this. I gave this one 4 stars. This book was beautiful, but I don't recommend this book for everybody. So the book is basically just Eugene and Angel, their relationship. You learn a little bit about Eugene and his past lives. You learn about Eugene in this current life he's living, about his past. Definitely check the trigger warnings. His childhood, not great, kind of hard to read about. But if you are the kind of reader where you need answers at the end of the book, you need to close the book and say, yes, that answered all of my questions. I know exactly what happened. The end. You're not going to like this one because you're not going to get the answers. And again, Eugene is an unreliable narrator, and it will be up to you as the reader to decide whether you believe Eugene about his past lives or whether you don't believe him. And he makes it kind of hard to believe him. He makes it really hard to not believe him. It's interesting. So again and again by Jonathan Evison. Really liked it. This next one, it kind of goes back and forth between 4.5 and 4.75. Here's the square. Super beautiful. Somewhere Beyond the Sea by T.J. Klune. This is the sequel to House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, and I loved House in the Cerulean Sea. My gosh, what a powerful story. This one, oh my gosh, loved it. Didn't like it as much as House in the Cerulean Sea, but I still really do appreciate this one, especially when reading the acknowledgments and you hear the story from T.J. Klune about who he wants to be as a writer. I think it's incredible. I think it's wonderful. This follows the story of Arthur Parnassus and now his partner, Linus Baker. They are basically the caretakers of magical children. And these children are, again, magical, and they are very feared. They are different. And so people don't like it. And it is their job to show the world that at the end of the day, they're just children, regardless of who they are. They are just children. And this is gorgeous. As a parent, this had me crying for sure, because I want to live in a world much like Arthur Parnassus and Linus Baker do, where the children that we love will not be judged for who they are. And closed-minded people will not be afraid of others. Right? It's a lot. I loved this. Gorgeous. 4.5, 4.75. It fluctuates. Really powerful. Definitely recommend reading House in the Cerulean Sea first, though. You might be able to go into this one and be okay, but it would definitely be much better if you read House in the Cerulean Sea. And I have said this, I did say this about House in the Cerulean Sea as well, but if they ever make these into movies, they'll have the greatest soundtracks of all time, because much like Lucy and everyone else in this book, gosh, do I love me some Dead Guy music. Oh, I love it so much. Next up, we have a romance, and this one was interesting. This is The Hedge Witch by Colleen Delaney. Now, I did pick this one up because I do follow Colleen Delaney's YouTube account. I'm not going to tag her in this post just because it is a review space, and authors, I think, should be separated from review spaces. But I do love Colleen Delaney's YouTube channel. So when I found out that she was coming out with this, I did want to support her. And this was cute. I liked this. So there's going to be a number of these. I think there's going to probably be 5 in the series. But this follows the Bay Sisters. And the Bay Sisters are 5 witches who, on Beltane, there's a prophecy. And it's revealed to them that there's going to be this big thing that happens. And they're all going to find their soulmates. So this is the first one in the series where you follow Laurel, who is a hedge witch, and she meets her soulmate, and other witchy things happen. This book is an open door romance and has some spice. So if you're not into spicy scenes, you might not like this one. I'm not all into spicy scenes. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I do enjoy some of them, and especially ones like this, I found nice. I liked them. They were definitely much more relatable and realistic, I guess I could say, the spice. So I enjoyed it. Here's the square. This is one of my favorite squares, I think, from the month. I thought that the square just, embodies that cover perfectly. The one thing I don't like about this book, because you're dealing with soulmates, the romance is very rushed. And it was just a little too rushed for me. But, this is exactly what I expected. I don't want to say I didn't expect a lot, but I just expected a fun, lighthearted, spicy, witchy romance, and that's exactly what this is. Next up, we have How High the Moon by Karyn Parsons. Now, I found this one at the thrift store, and I decided to pick this one up. Karyn Parsons is actually best known as her role as Hilary Banks in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. This, I believe, is her first book, but this is really good. So let me read the inside flap, because I think it would do a better job describing this book than I could. Let's see. In the Jim Crow South, 12-year-old Ella spends her days fishing and running around the small town of Alcolu, South Carolina, with her cousins Henry and Myrna. But life is not always so sunny for Ella, who gets bullied for her lighter skin tone and whose mother is away pursuing a jazz singer career up north in Boston. So this book, it is kind of just like a slice of life type of thing where you're following multiple characters. There are multiple points of view in this book. And I feel like I would have maybe liked this one more if it was just Ella's perspective. I ended up giving this one a 3.5 star. And this one does touch on some pretty heavy and sensitive topics. But because it is a middle grade book, it does it in a way that's easy for someone like me who can be very sensitive to that kind of thing. It's easier for me to digest it. One thing I would recommend, though, check out the trigger warnings. And there is a real life case that is depicted in this book. I don't recommend Googling it if you're sensitive like me. I did because I hadn't heard about it and I wanted more information. And while I am glad that my eyes were opened to what had happened, reading just the Wikipedia page about what happened to this 12-year-old boy really ruined my week. It was awful. So just check out the trigger warnings. If you're interested in what this one is about, do a little bit more research. I don't want to get too much into it here, but How High the Moon, 3.5 stars. And here is the square there. Really like it. I thought this one turned out beautiful too. So I'm happy I had this one. And overall, yeah, How High the Moon. Ooh, this next one. I read this book in about a day. So this was one of my book of the month add-ons this month, and I had to get to it right away. And that is A Sea of Unspoken Things by Adrienne Young. I read my first Adrienne Young book back in 2023, and that is The Unmaking of June Farrow. Lord, do I love that book. The Unmaking of June Farrow is one of my favorite books. It is incredible. So when I found out that Adrienne Young was coming out with a new book, I had to pick it up, and I liked this one. I gave this one 4 stars. This is much different than The Unmaking of June Farrow, but I really enjoyed it. The best way for me to describe an Adrienne Young book is when you're reading them, you can visualize color palettes. I know that doesn't make any sense, but it does in my brain. And that color palette is that of the cover. So this book is very atmospheric. All of her books, I feel, are very atmospheric. There's a lot of magical realism that goes on in these books. And this one is the same. It takes place in the Pacific Northwest. It is very cold. It's very wooden and chilly, cold, gray. Gray is the best way to describe this book, but in a good way. So this is kind of a mystery novel in a way. You have James and Johnny, who are twins, and an accident happens. And the moment this happens to her brother, James can instantly feel that her brother is gone. This accident has taken her brother. She knows within minutes that he is gone. And she has this kind of connection with him so that she feels his she feels things. She feels his feelings and all of that stuff. It talks a lot about the bonds of twins and siblings and whatnot. So she does go back to their childhood cabin and she has to kind of figure out what happened. They said it was an accident, but she's not really buying it. There's another mystery that's involved, but it's not, there's a lot of twists and turns, but it's not like a gripping, white knuckle mystery. It's very slow and atmospheric. I don't like really intense thrillers much. So like a mystery like this is perfect. Now there is some romance in this book as well, which was nice. It's not a big focus of the book. And I gotta say, when it comes to romance, Adrienne Young just understands my heart and soul. And I've been noticing lately that when it comes to romance, I have been yearning for more mature romances. Right now I'm reading a pretty popular fantasy romantasy novel that just came out, and I'm struggling with that romance because it just feels the same. Basically in 2025, I want more mature romance. That's not just about hot people hooking up. I need more of that emotional spice. Does that make sense? I don't know. It's not a spicy book. There's not a lot of romance, but I thought the romance was very beautiful, and overall, I did like this one. Here's the square. Oh, I love this square. I think it captures that cover perfectly. So 4 stars for Sea of Unspoken Things. Next time Adrienne Young comes out with a new book, again, I'll be first in line reading it day it comes out. I read this book, I think, in a day. I started it the night before my birthday and finished it on my birthday. It's only not even 300 pages, so pretty easy read. The next book I read, oh man, what a disappointment. I started this one for a book club that I joined, and if it wasn't for that book club, I would have probably DNF'd the book, but I needed to finish to say I read it for the book club. And it makes me really sad because the cover of this book is just gorgeous. This is The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leong. Now, this is a debut novel, and it is a cozy fantasy, right? Very low stakes fantasy. I just felt this book was too boring. I could not stay interested in this book. I did give this one 3 stars, so it didn't get below 3 stars, and I ended up not DNFing it. And the reason why is because I do feel like the characters in this book are incredible. The found family story in this book, love it. Everything else, no. The story is supposed to be low stakes, but what they're trying to figure out, I feel, is a pretty high stakes thing, right? But it just didn't seem that way in the book. And there just wasn't a lot going on. So unfortunately, I wasn't a fan of this one. People love this book. This one is getting so much praise. So I don't know what's wrong with me, why I didn't like this one, because I love a good cozy fantasy. But I guess when I need a cozy fantasy, it just needs to be more middle of the road. Not so cozy where nothing happens, but not so intense, right? There's a square. Teller of Small Fortunes. It's a bummer. I'll probably be getting rid of this one now that the review is done, which is a real shame because, again, that cover is beautiful. The cover illustration is by Devin L. Kurtz. Devin L. Kurtz, incredible job. Wonderful. Love it. Love the color. Book, not so much. Which leads me to my last book of January, and oh boy. Woo! We started January with kind of a stinker in Hecate Cavendish, but boy did we leave with a bang. Ooh, I loved this book. It's no surprise. Andy Weir, Project Hail Mary, 5 stars. Yes, yes, yes. One of my favorite books I read this month. This was incredible. I loved every moment of this book. This book follows Ryland Grace, who wakes up. He's lost his memory. He doesn't know what's going on. Long story short, he's up there in space and he's got to save the world. And you follow him doing it. This book is so charming. This book is hilarious. The characters in this book, wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Here is my square here. I hope this isn't a spoiler, but you have the sun on there. I wanted to get some of the goldness of the cover there. Oh, even if you don't like science, even if you don't like space, pick this book up because Andy Weir does this amazing job where he can write these stories that are so accessible to a reader like me, who's not the most proficient when it comes to science. Let's be real. I'm not an expert. but it was written in a way that even I could understand what was going on. Even I could understand the science behind everything. And even I was on board and just gripped, hoping to see what happened. Woo! This one is going to be a movie, I believe, next year, and I will be first in line. Ryan Gosling as Ryland Grace. Rocky, love it. I love this book. I love it so much. Read it. Please, 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 please read Project Hail Mary. That's it for all of my books and all of my squares for January. Thank you so much for joining me. Goodness. Let me know, what books did you read in January? Of all of the books I shared, which one interests you the most? And I hope you're staying warm and happy and cozy and just having a wonderful February so far. I love you so much. You are so wonderful. You just make me happy. You do. I love you so much. I'll see you guys all a little later. Bye.